Hi, welcome. I'm Stephen Robinson with a Wonkette bonus interview chat with Representative-elect Rita Harris from Florida's 44th House District. Welcome, Rita. We can hear you but not see you. You do exist, but it's about 9 o'clock p.m. your time. We didn't want you to have to, you know, do all the. We can see what you look like here. That's sufficient.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We are in the end of a campaign. I'm helping other people win and been doing a lot of door knocking. So yeah, I'm not fit for TV or public consumption right now. Yeah.
So just to quickly get started, I but just very impressed hearing about your story here in Florida. So you just recently, and so congratulations, but you recently unseated an incumbent in your district. Can you just tell us how? Because that would normally seem like a pretty steep hill to achieve. So can you just tell us a bit about what inspired you to run and how you were able to pull this off? Because it's quite an impressive story.
Thank you. Well, as you know, I was the vice chair of the Orange County Democratic Party, and I was the founding president of the Democratic Women's Club of South Orange County. And so I've always been, I think politically involved in Central Florida politics. Um, Especially since 2012. So it just, being involved in politics, when the redistricting happened, I was actually up in Tallahassee. We were actually talking to the representatives to see, where they were all going to land. And where I happened to live, that seat was open. There were no representatives that were going to be running for that seat. And I saw the district and I saw the way it was drawn. And I thought it would be a really good district for me to run in. And I have been wanting to run because I just felt like it's a good time for really kind of more outspoken Democrats who kind of lean into and are proud of our democratic values and what we stand for. And so that's when I decided to run.
Great. And you ran against Daisy Morales. She's a first time. So as part of so what happened? So as part of the redistricting is open, but was she shifted into the district or?
Well, yeah, that's the curious thing. So the district that I was in her district previously, District 48, and 1/3 of that old district is where I live, and 2/3 of it is the other district, 44. So when we went up to Tallahassee, she had indicated she was going to run in a different district. So I had seen this as a district that no one was running in, and it wasn't until after I filed, and someone had filed to run in District 43, the district that she intended on running in, that she kind of moved and jumped into this district. So I always say, like, I always tell people she ran against me. I filed first. I filed first in the district, and then she kind of moved down here. Because in Florida, you don't have to live in the district that you're running for until midnight on election day.
What's that strange? It's a strange timing. Like the truck
Yeah.
pulls up directly at midnight, and
Yeah, it's like Hong Kong. They better someone. I don't know if someone stands out there and makes sure that you're moved in by that date. I don't know how it works. I live in the district, so I don't know. But like, yeah, you don't have to live in the district, and our rules are like that. So she could have not lived here and run as long as she had moved in by the time if she had won, but she didn't. So
Mhm. And even for a freshman representative and incumbent, it seemed somewhat surprising to me. You got pretty much every endorsement from local Democrats imaginable, including, if I recall correctly, the gubernatorial nominee Charlie Crist. Can
yes.
you? Obviously, it's a credit to your work in the community and the door knocking and the activism, but you know, to a certain degree, it seems like often parties will protect their incumbents. It seemed as if perhaps the party was not particularly happy with Daisy Morales. Is that a fair assessment, or?
Uh,
Um,
Yeah, I think so. I think, like you said, I had built, I had built a lot of relationships through my work and my advocacy. But, the truth was that, there were some votes that she took that were, really disappointing is a mild way to put it. They were infuriating. And, and when you're the minority party in a state like Florida and you're going up against a governor like DeSantis, like, it's really imperative that we stick together. And, you know, she couldn't always be counted on to stick with the caucus.
And some of those votes were, I think, on guns and COVID, as I recall.
Yes, she was at one point the only Democrat that voted with, and it wasn't just these protocols. Like, it wasn't just that she was voting against like a mandate for vaccines. We have a huge issue with our governor consolidating power up in Tallahassee and taking away home rule from counties, and that vote did that. It took the ability for like our mayor, for instance, to decide that he was going to implement, say, a mask mandate. Decide that this is what we want in Orlando, in Orange County. We don't have that ability anymore for our mayor to decide what's best for our county. And that vote did that. And that was one of the votes that I was just like most like shocked by. I was like, I don't understand why. She's in a very blue county. You can kind of say, okay, well, maybe if you're in a county that you have to take a harder stance because your constituents lean a different way. But, Orange County is very blue. So it was not necessary for her to do that.
And especially, like, even if for the sake of argument, she strongly agreed with or disagreed with the mayor's choice, this is not like a power that DeSantis is ever going to relinquish. So strategically, it's just like supporting the idea of him. And I was covering some of this at the time when it happened. He was sort of just basically, because Republicans have always gone about local control, right? And
Yeah.
here was like, well, no, we don't care, even if um and at the time he had narrowly won the governor's race in 2018, but here it was saying these very blue counties and cities, you're going to do what I tell you.
Yeah.
And that was sort of, as you would say, it would seem that Democrats would stand up against such a kind of clear power grab, especially because in the area they wanted those protections. Most voters wanted those protocols in place. Um,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, yeah, and it took power. He's taken power away from school boards, to also put in, measures, public health measures that would help students. And that's what that vote did that as well. It wasn't just the mayor; it took power away from the school boards to decide safety protocols for the students in schools. And we all know how important it is. I mean, kids in schools, they're in close quarters, and school boards need to have that opportunity and that ability to decide, if they're going to implement, masks, or if they're going to implement, spacing kids out. And that vote took that away from them as well.
And so and Miss Morales has, or Representative Morales has already said she's going to run again against you. And the reason I bring up one thing she had stated that stuck out to me, it was about representation. I guess the district has a significant Hispanic population,
Hmm.
um, and that seemed strange. I mean, you are, from a diverse family yourself. Were you surprised that she would kind of go in that direction, or kind of basically imply that the choice that voters had made was not um, choosing a true representative of the community?
Yeah, I was surprised that she would say such a thing. But I mean, I guess you just take it for what it's worth. And she also didn't really, I don't think, understand the district, how it had changed, because it's significantly different than the district that she had previously represented. And I don't think that she did anything to reach out to the other members of the district, the other, my district is one of the most diverse districts. I would say the most diverse district in the county. And, she didn't do anything to reach out to any other of the constituency groups. And you have to let everybody know that you're there for them. So. Yeah.
And if, and just if I could ask you
Mhm.
about sort of what's going on in Florida, because even before your election, you've canvassed, I think worked on Gillen's campaign, and for Clinton and other, you've been in the trenches and so forth, helping Democrats, and it just seems as if since at least from what I'm reading and been reporting on, since Obama's victory in 2012, the, there's been sort of Democrats have been sort of losing ground. Nelson lost, and what do you account for that? There's different. I'm curious in your view on this because it's different views. One is that we're losing ground with Hispanic voters in Florida. Florida overall might be getting older and more conservative. But what do you is that is do you think that kind of what we're sort of seeing at a national level reporting wise is reflecting what you're seeing? And if so, do you have an idea of why that's occurring?
Yeah, I do think that we are losing ground in Hispanic and Latinx communities, certain communities, because the messaging that Republicans always like to use is that we're socialists, and it kind of preys on the concerns that people who have left countries, rightfully uh, feel worried and concerned about, and so that's one thing Republicans are very good about messaging, and they have sort of sold us as a party of comparing us when I read 1984, and I've always found it really interesting is because really they're the party that has they're the party that didn't want to accept the results of an election, much like you could compare to Maduro down in Venezuela. So but they use that messaging so skillfully and prey on communities that are worried, and and so that's one way that they're able to make inroads, kind of painting us as like a socialist party when in reality, there's so many programs in our country, that rely on, the social safety net, including ones that we all enjoy, like public roads and, libraries and schools
Mhm.
and things like that.
And that's always been confusing to me.
So I would
And
definitely
I
say
certainly
that's one way that they made inroads.
and I appreciate
Sorry.
that concern. I appreciate that concern. It just was weird to me because um, I don't, the oppression that was happening in those places. I don't think it's necessarily because of free lunch programs or something. It was often because of
Yeah.
strong men, as you're saying, rejecting election results or whatever. So to me, it would be. I'm always shocked that people could, even if they're not socialists, look at Trump and DeSantis and what they say and what they do and not go like, "Oh my God, this is eerily familiar to stuff. I should not vote for these guys. I should vote for." Even if you didn't agree with all of Biden's politics, he doesn't seem like someone who's going to take away your kids or lock you up for but at the same time, I mean, what you're saying is all messaging. They have messaged basically that DeSantis is some freedom fighter against Joe Biden, the 80-year-old despot. And
Yeah.
that's hard to counter, right? Like that's very effective messaging that they're doing.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and and you're right. It is double speak. The more he talks about freedom, the more he also tries to take freedom away from people in the state. But it is effective when people are hearing it over and over again, and they're getting that message. And also, they're very Republicans play a lot in Spanish radio. They buy up ad space, and they have talk shows, and that are very much more right leaning, and that's another place where people are exposed to the messages of the Republican Party. You combine that with the gerrymandering and the 30 years of control that they've had in the state. It feels like an uphill battle. It really does, and I feel like what's going on now is people are starting to feel the effects of um the loss. I mean, like, we lost in 2018, and like you said, it was so small. that we really shouldn't view DeSantis as somebody who cannot be beat, because he didn't win by a huge margin. But I think that the 4 years of just um, him, and the loss in 2020, where we might have won the presidency, but Florida didn't bring it home for Joe Biden. I
Mhm.
think people are starting to kind of feel it. So it's really hard to kind of get that enthusiasm, and especially when we need it most, which is right now. We really need to be enthusiastic. We can do this, but it's hard. It really is. You've, like I said, you're in an uphill battle, so you get tired, and now's not the time to give up. We gotta sprint to the finish.
Absolutely. And part of, I mean, we were talking about the gerrymandering. I mean, DeSantis had sort of in an unprecedented move, inserted himself into the drawing of the map, making an already, Republican favored map even more so, knocking out some minority districts. Specifically, I've argued specifically to try to get a challenge before the current Supreme Court to sort of
Mhm.
further gut voting rights. Like he's pretty diabolical in what he's sort of plotting out there. And as someone, like yourself, who is optimistic, who wants to kind of help the community, affect positive change, what is it like to kind of make that transition into the state house now as a member of a minority party against sort of um the Santis-led Republican Party? Like, what does that look like? Like, have you spoken to other Democrats in office about like what it's like, kind of going up against him and other Republicans now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's trying to get the gains where you can, and trying to, bring a positive impact to your community where you can, but making sure that that doesn't come at the cost of people's, basic human rights. So we don't, you don't compromise away um, people's rights to get those gains, but you do try to find, even if it's just a monicum. I know my one of the reps in Orange County, Representative Anna Escamani, was able to get like a diaper tax removed. So now diapers are tax free, and that's a help. It's People are struggling financially, and so every little bit helps. That's a win. It might not be the biggest win, but it is a win, and you kind of
Mhm.
take the wins that you can get. But you stand up, and sometimes the best that we can do is to make sure that we are out in our communities letting people know what we're trying to do for them, and what we're unable to do for them because of the fact that we're a minority party, and letting them know what the party in power is doing, and that's what we're doing, and we are doing it successfully. But but a big issue that we have also in this state is that we are kind of like a smaller version of the United States, and that is that a lot of us who are Democrats, or there's a lot of NPAs in the state, and so like left-leaning NPAs, we kind of coalesce around these cities like Orlando, Tampa, Miami, leaving the more rural areas. We're kind of like self-segregating by party, but the problem is that those rural areas are a bigger part of the state. They're a larger part of the state. So while the major populations, we live in the big cities, we're kind of like clustered, and so we have less seats in the house. We're all
Mhm.
clustered together, and so that creates an issue as well. Where we've kind of consolidated ourselves into these blue areas, and not much like the United States with the electoral map. It's not necessarily that they are a physical majority, but they are a political majority because of the way that we are kind of set up in the state. So, but it's just getting out there, letting people know, like, hey, we're trying to help, and we would be able to help if, they didn't constantly put these obstacles in our way, or make up, these culture wars that are, not even real, so that they don't have to do the real work of helping the people of the state.
And thank you for that. And I've always I hate that Bugs Bunny cutting off the Florida meme, because one, Democrats can't dismiss Florida. We're talking about
Yeah.
29 electoral votes and a state that Obama won twice. And I was covering a QAnon documentary, and in that documentary they were interviewing folks who had gotten full in on this, big Trump supporters, but they are people who voted for Obama twice. It's not just the get out joke about I would have voted for Obama for a third time. These are people who said, oh yeah, if Obama had run again, I would have voted for him instead of Trump. But I just didn't and I think that those people are potentially reachable, as you're saying, in those rural areas. We can kind of do more. Um, I grew up in rural South Carolina, and also it's not just that rural voters are also all kind of white
Yeah.
conservatives. There are also a lot of black people specifically and live in rural areas, and just improving your margins there, even if you aren't kind of winning seats there yet, but it's just improving your margins there will help you um statewide. But the point you'd made about um Florida being like the United States reminds me of kind of what DeSantis is really, how he's been governing. Definitely, to me, seems like a roadmap to how he would govern as president if he were
Yeah.
to run, in the sense of no matter how narrow his victory might be, he would manipulate the system uh, to sort of um, marginalize uh, any sort of liberal citizens and so forth. So states, he'd probably, or he would use the federal government to his advantage, like he's running in the state, where he's like tossing out prosecutors because they're not who are duly elected, because he deems that they're not acting the way he should. So that's really scary, and we're sort of seeing it play out in Florida.
Yes, no, definitely. And I mean, and that's, we've made the argument many times during this election that, stopping DeSantis now is actually, it's saving democracy. It's saving the United States, because we know that he is, going to make a run for the presidency. And, and if we are able to stop him here, that might squash his ambitions to move further, because we don't want the United States to have to deal with what the state has dealt with, which has been very bad. Like like you said, I mean, it's um, not just removing prosecutors, but going after businesses, going after the First Amendment, because they're saying things that he doesn't like them saying. He shows no regard for that as well.
And for the remaining time I have you here, I just for folks will be surprised because you're obviously well informed on the issues, but you're not a career politician. You're an activist, community, worked in a community organizer, and I've often argued we do need more candidates and elected officials sort of like you, like who's sort of, I want to serve my community and want to serve the folks who've been out there. And your background's been interesting. I mean, you've done like stand-up comedy, it's like that. I mean, you
Yeah.
are really, could you tell us a bit about your background, and then how that kind of, when you thought about perhaps entering politics?
Well, yeah, I've always been a theater kid. I went to a performing arts high school, so theater's always been, it's something I've always been interested in. But I've also always been interested in politics. I mean, when I was in high school, I actually combined my theater and my activism, and I was in a theater group for Planned Parenthood, called Positive Force Players, and we would write skits ourselves. We were teenagers, and we would write these skits, and then we would go and perform them at different high schools. And we were actually trained to be peer counselors so that we could answer a number of questions, after the shows, if fellow students had something that they were dealing with, we were able to kind of counsel them and get them to the right resources. And so, and as I got older, I've always been, politically, I've always been a voter, and I've always been politically engaged. So, it was natural for me to get involved in that, here in Florida. And I just think that though, through COVID, like, I did stand up before COVID came, and I was kind of, and I love to perform, but during COVID, um, and I spent a lot of time really, really digging in, more into the organizing. I've always done it, but I really got involved. And I think just seeing what a lot of people dealt with through the pandemic, just, I decided that, this is really what I want to do. I really would like to help people. And, eventually I ran for office and I won. And, but I'm still an organizer. My car, my car looks like an organizer's car. I have so many campaign signs, and I've been, like I said, I've been out knocking doors for other candidates to try to get them over the finish line. It's really important that we have good candidates up there in Tallahassee, good people up there who want to do the work.
And it's just, well, it seems, yeah, a lot of the news can be disheartening. So it's great to hear from folks on the ground that, that are engaged and like, despite, ignore the polls, get as many people to vote, and affect change as possible. And so definitely appreciate that work that you are doing, and that you will seems like you will continue it. You'll sort of continue being an organizer at heart.
Yes, always. Once an organizer, always an organizer. That's the way it goes for sure.
Yeah, and obviously you're not yet in the House of Representatives, but do you imagine potentially the U.S. House as and from Florida is something you would consider or think about if this goes well?
I I couldn't tell you. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. I, um, I I'm gonna take it one day at a time. I'm excited though to go up to Tallahassee. I really am. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to swearing in and getting started. And he's gonna call a special session right away, so I don't have to wait long to get to work.
What does he have going? What's going on at this special session, and how evil is it since he's calling it?
I know, right? So the special session is gonna be about property insurance. Um, but we suspect that there is going to be something on the table for abortion, because he seems to be, in a race to the bottom with Governor Abbott, to see who can, do the most. And so we do think that in during this special session that there's going to be, and possibly a constitutional carry, which would be like permitless carry for guns. That's some of the concern that we have going into this session.
Well, I appreciate you fighting that fight, and hopefully we can kind of push back against him as much as possible down there, because it is sort of he's kind of a scary dude. And as someone who had made fun of him during the 2018 election and had hoped for different outcomes, both in Georgia and Florida, the past 4 years have not been that encouraging. But to end on an encouraging note, I'm very happy that you are heading into Tallahassee. And thanks again for joining us and telling us about what's going on, and what's hopefully we can have you back on later, and actually see you and talk about how things have been going and the state of play in the next term.
I would love that. Thank you so much. And thanks for all you do, Stephen. I really appreciate it. You know, uh, Commentary is important. Political commentary is needed, and I appreciate all that you do.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This was Representative-elect Rita Harris down in Florida. Thank you, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
All right, bye.